Thank you so much for joining us for the last in our series From Diploma to Dream Job. If you joined last week's session on using AI for interview prep, this is going to build on that. And if this is your first session, you're in exactly the right place. Today, we're going to talk about the types of interview questions you can expect to receive and how to answer them in a way that's easy to follow and makes it easy to envision you in the role. The goal is to help you show interviewers not just that you're qualified, but that you're someone who solves problems, collaborates well, and is ready to add value from day one. So to start, I'll give a little bit about my background. My name is Robin Sadalov, and I'm one of the coaches and co-founders here at Converge. My background is a little unconventional. I started my career as a CIA analyst and then State Department officer. Then I worked at Tesla and later OpenAI. And along the way, I founded my coaching practice. And across all of those experiences, one thing has stayed constant: helping others grow, communicate effectively, and lead with clarity. And one of my favorite things to coach people on is helping them prepare for interviews. I've helped hundreds of people prep for interviews, and I've been on the opposite side of the screen as well. So today's session, as like I said last week, is very close to my heart. So let's jump in on today's topic, interview questions unpacked. This is what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about thinking like a hiring manager, which is a little bit of a review from last week, but it's so important to set the stage for everything we're going to talk about. And then we'll talk about the two types of questions. There are actually more than two types of questions, but there's really two types of ways that you answer questions in an interview. And then we'll have some tips for prepping on the day of, and then how to follow up to really stand out. And then we'll end with how to keep learning through the Converge Job Search course. All right. So, like I said, we talked about this last week, but for anybody who wasn't able to join us, I want to quickly go over this again because it's incredibly important. So, as we discussed, interviews aren't about proving that you're good enough. They're about showing how you can solve a company's problems. Hiring managers are always thinking, can this person solve the problem that we're hiring to solve? So, you need to make it easy for them to picture you in the role. So, instead of listing credentials, you want to focus on showing your process and how you think. So, for example, somebody might say in an interview, I built a data dashboard for the campus health clinic. But instead, I encourage you to go deeper. You want to talk about how you figured out what to build, how you coordinated people, and the impact that you had. So, something that works better is probably I met with the clinic director and head nurse to define the three metrics they cared about the most. I translated that into a simple project plan, ran weekly working sessions with a six-person capstone team, and built a lightweight pipeline in Google Sheets and an app script to pull appointment data. We piloted with two front desk staff and then fixed accuracy issues, and I trained the team with a one-page standard operating procedure document. Reporting time dropped by 4 hours a week, but the dashboard surfaced a spike in no-shows, which then we created an SMS reminder test, which cut no-shows by 12%. So you see, it's the same skill, but it's unpacked in a way that lets them see your value and your process. So they can actually see you in the role. And that shift, that thinking like a hiring manager instead of a candidate, changes everything about how you prepare and how you show up. All right, so mindset set. Now let's simplify what you can expect on the day. Most interviews boil down to two kinds of questions: narrative and behavioral or values based. First, narrative questions like, tell me about yourself or walk me through your resume. These are your chance to tell your story and connect the dots for them on why you are the person for the job. Second, behavioral or values-based questions usually start with things like, tell me about a time when, or what would you do if? These are about how you think and behave, your judgment, your initiative, and your self-awareness. The key here is to identify the question behind the question. What is the skill or quality that they're hoping to hear? And then you tell them a story in a way that's easy to follow and highlights that you have that skill or quality. Both kinds of questions are looking for the same thing. They're looking for proof that you can solve problems, learn fast, and fit into their culture. So let's break each down on how you should approach each type. So starting with the first kind, the narrative openers. Here's how you answer, tell me about yourself, so it actually sets you up for the rest of the interview. The question shows up in almost every interview in some form, and it's one of the places where candidates can sometimes lose their footing. The mistake that people often make is turning it into a full biography. The person interviewing you does not need to know your full life story. And if you go that route, you're making them do the work to try and figure out if they see you in the role. So they're listening for those key things from your experience that actually apply to the role. and you might bore them to death in the process. So the better approach is what I call bottom line plus three reasons. So think of this as your elevator pitch. You want to start with your headline, a quick summary of who you are and what drives you. And then you give three short, relevant proof points that show how you got here. What you've studied or done that connects to the role, a skill or strength that you bring that matters to them, a glimpse of what motivates you, why this field or this team. And then you close by linking it directly to the role. That's why this opportunity really excites me. It's the intersection of the skills you just highlighted and their need, right? Pulling it all together. I did this when I was interviewing for a highly competitive role when I was an analyst at the CIA. So I started with a headline. My headline was, I've been preparing for this job for the past 3 years, which got their attention and happened to be true. And then I gave a bottom line that encompassed how my background prepared me for the role. So I said, I've built X skills, learned Y topic, and developed a network among Z people, which I understand are the keys to success in this position. So it's an overarching statement that tells them what I'm about to tell them. Then I explained the X skills, moved into explaining what I did to learn Y topic, and then the projects that expanded my network through Z people that were keys to success in the role. Throughout, I showed my excitement for the position, smiling and showing my personality. And I got the job. So you want to keep this first answer to around 3, maybe 4 minutes. Remember, you're telling a story, you're not reciting a resume. So I normally tell people not to write out and memorize their answers to all the questions they can expect to receive in an interview because that can make you seem robotic. And stiff. And what you're going for here is authentic conversation. You want a back and forth, a give and take. But for this first answer, I think it's okay to really plot out what you want to say and memorize it. But the key is practicing your answer enough so that it sounds fluid and not stiff. You want it to be conversational, right? All right, so now that you know how to tell your story, let's talk about the structure that helps you answer almost every other interview question with confidence. And this is the method that's going to make your answers sound clear, thoughtful, and grounded, even when you're nervous or caught off guard. Almost every behavioral or situational question can be answered with star plus. You'll hear star a lot. I call it star plus because I add something at the beginning and something at the end, which I'll explain. These are the questions that usually start with, tell me about a time when, give me an example of, describe a situation where you had to, what's a challenge you faced, what's a time you showed leadership, teamwork, adaptability, something like that. They can sound different, but they all want the same thing, to understand how you think and how you work under pressure. And here's why Star Plus works so well. It forces structure and focus. It gives them a mental model of what they're about to hear, and it helps to keep you from rambling, and even better, helps you to guide the interviewer through your thought process step by step. So the first step in this process is, like I said, to identify the question behind the question. What is the skill or characteristic that they are hoping to hear from you? For example, with the question, tell me about a time when you had a difficult interpersonal conflict. The interviewer doesn't care what happened. They don't care about the ins and outs of the situation. They want to know, are you self-aware and do you have the emotional intelligence to heal the inevitable rifts that can occur in any workplace? In short, can you work well with others and recognize how to get back on track when you run into difficulties? One side note on this is one of my good friends has done a lot of hiring for big tech companies, in particular Amazon, and she told me she never hires anybody who doesn't show some level of humility and self-awareness. So you really want to make sure that that is coming across in your answers. You don't want to seem overly confident and like you're somebody who steps on other people. All right. So once you've identified the question behind the question, you can craft your answer. And here's how it breaks down. So the two pieces I added for the plus are the bluff and then the tie back at the end. The bluff, this is where you tell them what you're going to tell them. So you're basically highlighting that skill or characteristic that you're about to show with your answer. Don't worry if you don't have a bluff down pat the first time that you answer this while you're practicing. Oftentimes, my coaching clients need to tell their story all the way through once before we can identify what skill or characteristic the story actually shows. Then you move into situation. What was happening? You're going to give a quick context so the interviewer understands the setting. Again, very short. Then it's task. What needed to be done? What was the problem or the goal? This is also very short. Action. What did you do specifically? Not your team, but you. What was your role in this situation? That you're going to spend a little more time on. And then result. What happened as a result of your actions? Was there a measurable outcome? What was the impact? Again, you're going to spend more time on this. And then you're going to end it with a tie back to this role. Why does this example matter for this position? The last part is where most people stop too soon. Don't just say what you did, connect it to the job you want. This is where you're showing them how you can solve their problem, right? So as you're crafting your answer, remember, like I said, you're going to spend the most time on action and result. Situation and task should be very short. And this is one of those places where a lot of people can ramble. So practicing these, and getting that down is really important. Here's an example of how to do this well in a very, albeit short example. So if you got a question that's something along the lines of, tell me about a time when you had an impact in your working world or working experience, right? So, organization and cross-functional collaboration have been the keys to my success throughout school and my professional roles. That's your bluff. So you're cluing them in to pay attention to how you are organized and how you work well with others. During my internship last summer, that's the situation. That is as short as you want to be. Internship last summer. We were behind on a campaign deliverable for a major client, and we needed to get the final assets to the client within 2 days, but two departments weren't aligned. That's your task or problem. Again, very short. I created a tracker, a shared tracker, met with the designer and copywriter to align timelines, and followed up with short daily stand-ups to check in on progress. That's your action. That is what you did to solve the problem. We cut our turnaround from 5 days to two, and my manager said it was the first campaign we delivered early. This is your impact. I realized how much I love project coordination and fostering clear communication across teams, which is exactly why this role appeals to me. This is how you tie your answer back to the position. See how it all kind of flows together, and there's a clear framework that you're following. That is STAR Plus in action. Brief setup, clear action, concrete result, and tie back that helps them visualize you in the role. You can solve their problem. When you get this right, you sound calm, confident, and professional, even if it's your first interview. It takes practice, but once you master STAR Plus, you can handle almost any question that they throw your way. I've used it even for the tell me about a time when you failed kind of question. It works great. All right. So you've got your mindset and your tell me about answer and your star plus stories. So now let's talk about how you prep for the day of the interview or the day of the interview. This is the part that separates people who hope to get it well from people who make it go well, right? So these are some small things that you can do, but together they communicate professionalism, preparation, and confidence. So you want to start with the prep, and I don't mean cramming. Before the interview day, you want to have taken the time to choose your star stories. You're going to want 5 or 6 of them that show the skills or attributes that the job description highlights. For example, if the posting mentions teamwork, adaptability, problem solving, and communication, those are the buckets that you're going to want to cover with your stories. And you're going to want to think of a star plus example for each of those buckets. If you missed last week's session on using AI for interview prep, I do recommend that you go back and watch it because we talked about how to pull those skills and attributes out of the job description. That's the list that you're going to want to use here. We also talked about how to use it to do research on the people interviewing you so you can drop in things that allow you to connect with them on a personal level. So it's another reason to go back and watch. I always tell my coaching clients to make a table at the top of the page that's going to sit in front of you if it's a virtual interview. The left column is the skills or attributes that you pulled out from the job description, those 5 or 6 skills or characteristics. The right column is your list of just 1 or 2 words to remind you of your star stories, each star story. When you're asked a question, you can jot down notes on what they're asking to make sure that you fully cover it, which allows you a quick peek at your list and to cross off the skills and stories as you go. You can even say, I'm just taking some notes so I make sure to cover everything that you're asking. That helps in case you have a tendency to go blank when you're nervous. You also, in terms of what you wear, you want to dress a half a step more formal than is their norm, right? You're trying to fit into their culture. So if it's a tech or creative role, you can skip the full suit. Button up with no tie or a simple top with a blazer or a sweater, that looks confident without being stiff. If it's government, law, or anything more traditional, wear a suit because that signals respect and readiness. The goal here isn't to look fancy, it's to look like you fit into the culture of the company or the organization and show a level of respect for your interviewers. Do not default on the side of being overly conservative. If you walk into a tech company in a suit, they're going to think this person doesn't fit in our culture, and you're going to set yourself up kind of to fail from the beginning. So, if it's in person, you're going to want to plan the logistics out carefully. Drive the route or take public transportation, however you're going to get there. Get to the place ahead of time, especially if it's somewhere unfamiliar. Make sure that you know how to get there and how much time it's going to take. Check the parking options if you're driving. Figure out how long security takes to get into the building, and always plan to arrive at least 10 to 15 minutes early. You do not want to start the interview day already stressed because you couldn't find the entrance to the building. If it's virtual, you're going to do everything that you can to control your environment. So check the lighting and the camera framing. You're aiming for a bright, even light in front of you, not behind, because if the light's coming from behind you, it's going to throw you into shadow. You're going to pick a simple, plain background, a plain wall, maybe a picture or a tidy bookshelf. Whatever you do, do not have an unmade bed piled high with dirty clothes on it, right? Like you want to avoid having anything distracting behind you. Also, try to avoid blurring your background because that can look artificial or glitchy sometimes. Interviewers these days, especially, are on guard for deep fakes and other things like that. So you don't want to do anything to make yourself look like you're doing anything sketchy. Um, do a quick test call the day before on the same platform that you're going to be using. So for the interview, so Zoom, Teams, Google Meet, whatever they're using, make sure that you're comfortable logging in, that your camera and your mic work, and that your name shows up professionally. This is 5 minutes of prep that can prevent panic later. Trust me, I've been there. And finally, your mindset. Take a breath before you log in or walk into the room. Remind yourself, you're not there to prove your worth. You're there to have a conversation about whether this is the right fit on both sides. You're interviewing them as well as they are interviewing you, right? And what you're going for here is a conversation, a give and take, a back and forth. You want it to feel like you're having coffee with a friend, right? You've done the prep, you've got the story, so now you just need to connect with them on a human level. And don't forget to smile. I even tell people with that piece of paper that's in front of you, write the word smile in capital letters with an exclamation point on the top, or put it on a sticky note on your monitor so that only you can see it. When you smile, it signals that you're at ease and it puts your interviewer at ease in return. And then they're having a good time and you're having a good time and everybody feels good about the experience. All right. So once your job or your interview's over, your job isn't quite done. The thank you note is your last impression that you want to leave. And it's the easiest one to get right. So most people either skip this or send something so generic that it disappears into the noise. And you can do better. So you want to send it quickly. You want to always send it within 24 hours. Sooner is good, even the same afternoon, but you definitely want to be thoughtful. So don't be rushed in doing this. If you met multiple people, you need to send a personalized message to each person that you talked to. They might compare notes, and so personalizing it shows that you were paying attention. You also want to personalize it so that the person, you're actually tailoring it to the conversation that you had with them. You want to keep it warm, direct, and short. 2 paragraphs, three tops. You want to reiterate your excitement and show how you add value. The first paragraph should thank them for their time and mention something specific from your conversation. The second should reinforce enthusiasm and fit. And I realize the example I have on here does not have a 2 paragraph format. Um, and so the one that I have on here is actually one that I used, but I do think that you can do better, right? I did get the job, so I will say that, but it could be more impactful if it had included some detail about our conversation or insight into something specific about the role. You also want to use it strategically. So this is a subtle way to fix small moments that you might want to fix from the conversation. So if there's a question that you fumbled or you forgot to mention something relevant, you can lightly add it here. Just one sentence, no apology, something like, after our conversation, I realized I should have mentioned that I also led the onboarding project for new interns last summer, another experience that strengthened my coordination skills. So clean, natural, and shows that self-awareness. If you don't have contact information for the interviewers, the recruiter can give it to you or they can forward it on your behalf. Sometimes companies don't want to give out email addresses. In the past, when I've had a panel interview, so it's like 5 separate interviews in a row, I will send one long email to the recruiter and say, for Bob, and then there's a pair, the note, and then a dashed line, and then for Mary, and then there's the email and a dashed line, so that they can cut and paste and forward your thank you notes on. Um, This is not just politeness, although it is politeness too. It's also positioning. So sometimes a great thank you note is the difference maker. There's a talent manager that I follow and know personally. I follow her on LinkedIn, and she just posted about this and noted that in her experience, only 50% of people send thank you notes, and it is a huge differentiator for her. So think of your thank you note as the final handshake. It's short, it's warm, it's confident. It doesn't need to win you the offer. It just needs to confirm the impression that you're organized, thoughtful, and someone that they want to work with. All right. So before we jump into the Q&A, I want to quickly share why we created the Converge job search course because everything we talked about today and in this whole series is part of a much bigger picture. We keep seeing the same challenges again and again, bright, capable graduates doing all the right things but feeling stuck in the process. So at Converge, we focus on helping early career professionals build the skills that make them successful at work. Not just the technical skills that you learn in school, but the people skills like communication, confidence, and navigating the unwritten rules of the workplace. So we built the Converge job search course because we kept seeing the same patterns. People who were smart and motivated, but overwhelmed by the job search. Endless online applications, few responses, and a lot of confusion about how to stand out once they finally got the interview. So we designed Converge to make that transition less confusing and a lot less lonely. So this course walks you step by step through every stage of the job search, from defining your goals to using AI for research and networking, preparing for interviews, and setting yourself up for success once you start the job. It's a 6-week program built for new grads and early career professionals, and is led by coaches, me and my co-founder Elle, who've been on both sides of the hiring table. You'll learn to use AI and research tools to uncover opportunities that fit your skills, build a professional brand that gets noticed, practice and refine your interview answers so that they sound confident and authentic, turn conversations into real job offers, and learn the habits that make you successful once you're in the door. So if today's session sparked ideas or gave you a few light bulb moments, that's what the course expands on. So you can scan the QR code or visit convergecoaches.com/job search, and we're offering a 10% discount with the code your job, your job 10, all in capital. All right, so let's open it up to questions. I noticed that there's one in the chat. Let me just open that up. A woman shared a video with me this week when she says that I do a power pose before the interview. I tried it yesterday and definitely noticed a noticeable difference. Yes. Yes, absolutely. Power poses. I just was talking to a coaching client about that last week. So for anybody who doesn't know, power pose is where you stand in the mirror, and you just kind of like chest up, head up, and you just kind of breathe in and you embody, envision yourself succeeding in whatever you're about to walk into, whether it's a meeting, an interview, a presentation, anything like that. That can be really, really impactful. All right. So what other questions do you have? What parts of the job search are kind of the most challenging for you right now?
I'll hop off. Hi, Robin.
Hi, Dana. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, no worries. So I think where I'm at in my process is I really need to sit down and get like a core 5 or 6 star frameworked stories. I
Mhm.
have the stories. They're all right. Most of the time I wing it. It goes okay, but it could definitely be a lot tighter. So I guess my question is, do you have like a standard kind of list of 5 or 6 questions? They're always a little bit different, but they're kind of those like typical 5 or 6 you're going to get in that behavioral interview. What are the main ones? The weakness or the tell me about a time you failed is a common one.
Yeah, you always want to be prepared for that. That doesn't always come up, but you want to know, like, you want to have that down because that's the thing that's going to make you panic if you don't have it
Mhm.
prepared. Some other ones, things showing flexibility. Tell me about a time when you had to shift priorities at a moment's notice, right? One that's kind of challenging for people sometimes is tell me about a time when you had um, a lot of responsibility but no power.
Mm,
Right? So like you're not in control, but you had a lot of stuff you had to get done, but you had to work through other people. Um, um, Tell me about your proudest moment.
mm,
That's like a great opportunity, right? Because you
yeah,
can just hit that out of the park. Yeah, difficult interpersonal conflict is one that kind of comes up a lot, I think. Um, if you're in sales, t talk me through your sales process. What
yeah.
differentiates you? Why are you better at this than other people? Um, the question that's asked, so think about the questions almost like how a politician approaches questions. You don't have to ask or answer the question in exactly the way it's framed, right? And that's where thinking about the question behind the question really comes in. If you're listening to the question with your, deep thinking ears and you're hearing, okay, what they want to hear is flexibility here. So I'm going to tell a story about flexibility. What they want to hear here is organization. So I'm going to tell a story about organization. What they want to hear here is cross-functional communication. And you get those things from the job description, right? So hopefully you've walked in, you've prepared star stories that talk about those skills and capabilities. So whatever the question is, you're thinking about, okay, which of these characteristics and skills are they looking to hear? And then that's the story I'm going to tell. And I'm just going to tweak it to make it fit with the question that they asked. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
Could
how
you go as far as to say that you could use a GPT, feed it the job description, and you've already identified the keywords, and now you're preparing for the interview saying, these are the keywords, like what kinds of behavioral questions might I receive based on
Yes, and I
these
would go a step
themes?
further. So if I haven't sent it to you, ping me after and I'll send it to you, the recording from last week. But I talk about
Yeah.
using ChatGPT to do this. You want to take the job description, you want to take everything that you know about the company. So the company's website, their values, their priorities, all of these things, and everything that you can find about the person interviewing you. That's the other piece of this is you take all their LinkedIn posts, every interview that they've done, every podcast they've been on, every article they've written, put it into ChatGPT, and then based on the job description, the company's goals, their values, the person interviewing you, then you ask it, okay, what kinds of behavioral questions am I likely to get? Right. So when I'm interviewing people, some questions that I always ask, I always am looking for like, what does their teamwork look like? I'm always looking for what gets them into flow and what gets them out of flow because I'm trying to figure out like, are they jazzed up by the things they're going to have to do in this job? Right. And then I always, if it's like somebody who's going to be managing other people, I ask like, what are you most proud of as a manager? Like, what's your biggest win as a manager since becoming manager? Those for me, those are some questions that I tend to ask. And I also am looking for empathy. I'm looking to see that this person thinks about other people around them, and kind of acts appropriately in the workplace based on the needs of their colleagues. And so if somebody was pulling all of my posts on LinkedIn, they would likely get questions like that from ChatGPT. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank
Cool.
you.
Any other questions? Thanks for taking notes, Dana, too, in chat. All right. Well, please, if you have any questions, I'm going to send the recording out. Feel free to share with anybody in your world who is in a job search, struggling, figuring this out, particularly post-college. And if you have any questions or want help with anything, please feel free to reach out. I'm all over LinkedIn. And so is my colleague Elle for Converge. So feel free to reach out to us either directly or through the Converge account. And thank you so much for your time. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Miss Robin. See you.
Thanks. Bye.